as Tarak said, this is all about solidarity and building knowledge, but also building first-hand connections. I'm going to give you a little sort of overview, really, of the Australian peace movement and the work that's being done there. So we've got a PowerPoint coming up. Not yet. So the organisation that I represent is called the Independent and Peaceful Australia Network. We're a pretty young national peace network, only 7 years old. The impetus for setting up the National Peace Network was the decision that was made by President Obama, or agreement that was signed with Obama and the then Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard. It's not there. This one? I don't see it. Close it. Okay, where are we? There we go. No, that's not it. File. No, that's not it. It's the other one.
Somebody should have been up here in this after the last break.
That's it, IPAN presentation. Okay, success. Okay, so yeah, just as I was explaining, that was the stimulus for setting up this National Peace Network, which has brought together a range of organisations across the country. IPAN intends to be a broad peace network aimed at establishing our independence, i.e. our separation from the United States military alliance. A previous Prime Minister, former Prime Minister who's now deceased, Malcolm Fraser, played a Conservative Prime Minister, I must add, played an important role in establishing an alternative dialogue in the country about our relationship with the United States with a book that he called Dangerous Allies, an amazing book to read. So that's the vision for IPAN. As others have said about the importance of the wisdom of Indigenous people, we also recognise that a truly independent and peaceful Australia cannot be achieved without resolving the past cruel and unjust takeover of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lands, and in its activities to work to address these injustices. That is an ongoing issue, and IPAN is in there supporting our Indigenous friends. So as I said, Barack Obama made the announcement in 2011, and we've now seen a permanent military presence in the north of Australia, in Darwin. If you look at the map, you can see where Darwin is, just at the very top of Australia, for those that don't know. You can see that it's placed really very much in the Southeast Asian region. So Darwin has quite a mixed community, a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Filipino people, East Timorese, as well as a very transient Australian population. Less than 500,000 people living in Darwin, and a large Indigenous population as well. So just in the last couple of months, this event happened with one of the Air Force training exercises, Operation Black Hawk. A fuel tank was accidentally dropped on Darwin, luckily missing any population, but that's one of the risks of the American base there. So although it was set up as a marine base to start with 250 Marines building up to a total of 2,500, interesting to listen to what has been said about Okinawa and the potential for success there. The 2,500 Marines that are coming now to Darwin are actually on transfer from Okinawa. So one of our concerns is that, in fact, if there is success in getting rid of the Americans in Okinawa, that those troops will, a lot of them will be moved to Australia. Australia has never hosted a foreign military force before in our history other than during wartime. So it was a huge wake-up call. It's another bit of information about the Marines there. The alliance, the Australian-American alliance, which was signed around the time of the Korean War, which is used by our government to justify our paper-thin differences of support, of opinion from the two major parties supporting American activity. It was initially, in fact, the substance of the alliance says that we should consult in the event that there be an attack on either country, which is very different to just gung-ho support for American military actions around the world, which is what we have done. It sickens me to think that we have gone in and supported the horrendous wars that America has run in Korea, in Vietnam, in Afghanistan and Iraq. Australia has been there, just hanging on to the coattails. It's really quite shameful. So this is an indication of the American military presence in Australia. You can see that it's quite widespread, ranging from intelligence gathering to satellite tracking. Most of you will have heard of Pine Gap, just pivotal for American military activity anywhere in the world, really, and specifically in relation to drone activity in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan. So it's quite a challenge for us to aim for independence from America and to see those bases closed. So in the context of that, the political climate in Australia, as I indicated, the Labor Party in Australia does not distance itself from the foreign policy of the Conservatives. What goes on when they visit the White House and have meetings with American officials, we don't know. But, you know, you have to think that there's either a degree of brainwashing or bribery or whatever to get them to toe the line, but that's exactly what they do. We've got a situation in Australia now with IPAN, the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons, and the treaty developing pledges from politicians. So we've got 85% of the Australian Labor Party members of Parliament who are very likely to be the next government in April or May next year, pledging that they will go ahead and sign the treaty. But in my books, I think it's highly unlikely, unfortunately, because it would challenge all of those bases that you've just seen, particularly the naval ones where it's almost certain that they're carrying nuclear weapons, and part of the treaty requires that there is no presence of those nuclear weapons on the territory of the country that signs. So what I wanted to just expand on was that there is there's a new Cold War in the Pacific as well. Along with the Pacific pivot, there's been a significant increase in armaments and hardware, military hardware, and a lot of money being spent on it. So Australia's been now up to the 2% of the GDP, which President Trump requires us all to spend. The price tag now being $95 million a day, which when we do mention that to people at stalls and in public situations, it does certainly make them think. So as in other places, those big defence contractors are the ones who profit from the arrangement. This map shows just how significant the containment, or surrounding at least, of China is with US bases. It's quite revelatory when you show this to people. It's just so obvious. The military spending, and CIPRI, the Stockholm Institute, is very instrumental or helpful in alerting us to just what's happening in terms of the amount of money that countries are now spending on military equipment and activity, instead of supporting their people with the taxes that come from the people. It's just a bit of an indication there. So Indonesia is not our nearest neighbour, but it is a country of over 300 million people. It's the most northerly large country to Australia. Indonesia is kind of hedging its bets, I think. It both plays into the Americans and to the Chinese. Interesting. And Australia is kind of always in a difficult position with the Indonesians. We don't want to upset them so that we don't secure those trade deals, but we have upset them just very recently. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, made an announcement that Australia was planning to move its embassy to Jerusalem at the same time as we're negotiating a trade deal with Indonesia. So there's a lot of talking going on at the moment and trying to manage that situation. And I don't know whether you're aware, but the ASEAN conference is happening as we speak in Papua New Guinea. So Papua New Guinea is our closest neighbour, was once a colony of Australia, and West Papua being the the rightful unified group that live on that island. We've taken it upon ourselves as a national peace network to support the independence claims of the West Papuans. In the Pacific, there's an indication also that they also see the importance of West Papuan situation. I'm sure many of you know just what's going on in West Papua. It's really horrendous. In our books, it is our Palestine, just what's happened in West Papua with the occupation and ethnic cleansing, really, of that country, and the horrific crimes that have been committed. So one of the other developments in the region is that China's been very successful in supporting various Pacific countries financially and establishing a soft footprint in the Pacific. So the Australian government, and I'm sure with a little bit of prodding from the United States, has decided we're going to be a lot more active in the region. This has only happened in the last sort of 6 months. One of the weird situations is that the offshore detention system for refugees. How many of you are aware of that offshore detention system? Australia should be at the International Criminal Court, really, because of what we are doing to people coming and seeking refuge in our country and being treated like they are criminals. So a large number of men, in particular, have been locked up on an island of Papua New Guinea, Manus Island. They've now been moved out of the facilities that they were in And there's a picture of where Manus Island is, probably strategically of significance too, to the north of New Guinea, in terms of the build-up of military forces. So the Lombrum Naval Base on Manus Island, recently the facility used to house the refugees, has now been turned into a naval base, which will be accessible for Australia and Papua New Guinea, and quite likely American naval vessels as well. So that is the facility the refugees were housed in, which is now a naval base. So IPAN, as I said, is a national network. We've got about 50 organisations, trade unions, faith groups, peace groups and environment groups as well. Our two main campaigns that we're focusing on are about military spending. I mean, when we're looking at and we're talking about ways in which to build a mass movement, the problems that we have are many, but I guess key to what we're thinking is just, you know, how do we break through the malaise of consumerism that most people are just caught up in with their jobs, their long hours, and the drug that is consumerism. And one of the areas that we think there is potential to engage people more broadly outside of the movement is on the amount of money that's being spent on preparing for war, being involved in war, and spending on this massive program of military spending. So that's one of the campaigns that we are working on. And also the other campaign is, we've titled it Give 'em the Boot, and it's about putting an end to the force posture agreement that was signed by Barack Obama and Julia Gillard. So this is just some pictures of various activities that we have engaged in over the years. We've had 4 conferences. We've had a conference in Alice Springs to mark the 50th anniversary of the signing of the agreement to host Pine Gap. We've been in Melbourne, in Brisbane, in Canberra, and next year we will be having our national conference in Darwin to shine a light on the role that, you know, Australia's allowed America to play in establishing a strong military, naval, air force presence on the tip of Australia, poised as a starting point for war wherever they may decide they wish to take us. So it's really important that people in Australia, people internationally know about Darwin, and we'd like to invite any of you to come to that conference, August the 4th next year. We would welcome your presence and also your promotion of the conference through your own organisations. So I hope you'll go away from the conference knowing a little bit more about Australia, the land down under, and it's great to be here with you all, but particularly great to be here with the people from our region, from Japan, from Guam, from Jeju, from the Philippines. This is a region that we think should be live up to the name, the Pacific Ocean, the Peace Ocean, and that's what our aim is. Thank you.